about to go live here.
Yes, I've got a meeting now streaming live on Facebook.
Right, here we are. This is the last day of World Unity Week Convergence Rooms. And I'm here with Geoff North, one of my very favorite mentors. And we have had a very full few days, a lot of discussions. One of the focuses has been the Watershed Wisdom Council Concept. And we're here today to really look at implementing and what's really the first steps to making the Watershed Wisdom Council Concept a reality as an evolutionary driver, toolbox, method, model. So Geoff, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Is that now over to me?
Yeah, it's over to you, thrown to you.
Okay, right. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are when you're listening to this recording. What Elizabeth and myself are essentially setting up is a virtual global community organization. A large task, however, it's eminently doable and achievable. However, its success and effectiveness depends upon the speed, the momentum, and the competence of the people who get involved. What I mean by the competence of the people is their knowledge, their skills, and their behaviors. Knowledge, I see this in abundance all this week, 24/7, from all the well-meaning people who are involved. Except, I might add, governments, public bodies, public utilities, who are presently presenting incorrect and misleading information. And they are also practicing what Elizabeth, my friend on here, they're practicing what she refers to as the delusion of separation, which I've sprung that one on her.
Yeah, you did. You stole my punchline.
No, it's only a lead-in. No, it's only a lead-in.
Okay.
We'll refer back to that in a few minutes,
okay.
to expand on. Essentially, I have just 3 slides that I'll be working on to give you an outline of what I'm helping Elizabeth to achieve. I'll explain briefly what each one means in turn. So this is not going to be a presentation. And if anyone joins into this call or is listening and wants to come onto the call, what we'd really, really like to do is generate a discussion, an interactive discussion. And all of your inputs are vital. In the absence of having enough people for a discussion, Elizabeth and myself will have a discussion between the two of us in the interim. If anyone
always my pleasure, Geoff.
Thank you. Okay, and then we'll take questions afterwards, and that could be by email to Elizabeth and or myself.
Beautiful.
What this needs to focus on is we've selected a socio-tech model, which I'm going to ask Elizabeth to put on the screen in a moment. And this is to show we need to focus on the human side. that may seem rather an obvious thing to say. But when people are setting up organizations, whether it's business organizations or community organizations or voluntary organizations, and whether they be local, global, or whatever, it's part of the organization development that is underestimated. And if Elizabeth, you could put up the socio-tech model.
Okay.
And I'll briefly explain. And whilst this is coming up, we're using an organisational approach, which I may refer to out of habit as OD, tied in with whole systems thinking and whole systems cross-cultural working.
It's taking a minute to bring it up here.
That's okay. And this model, you'll notice when it comes up on the left-hand side.
Well, before we get in, Geoff, I think it might be helpful to just review quickly what the Watershed Wisdom Council is. So,
all right, okay, sorry.
Because I don't know who's going to be watching this that's familiar with the concept. And keeping in mind that this is a concept only, it's been percolating in my heart and brain for probably about 10 years. And the Watershed Wisdom Council offers a organizational design model mimicking the structure of our essential source, water, for the co-creation of resilient, regenerative communities by empowering the implementation of whole system solutions for our most basic needs of pure water, pure food, and pure life. So it's really bringing in the wisdom of the entire watershed, not just the humans. I think that's key, is as integrated with the natural world and in a biomimicry, following the intelligence, the supreme intelligence of water itself. And so essentially it's, are you seeing the slides?
No, I'm not.
No, okay, so I'm gonna back it up here. Get the share screen going. Okay. This is a basic, this is the graphic that first got me thinking about this as a system, and the graphic came to me first, and then I've learned more and more about whole systems thinking from the graphic itself. So I found that fairly interesting, that I had an image to fall into, really, and working with different people. Barbara Marks Hubbard, who is very influenced by Buckminster Fuller, and also Nancy Poland, the social architecture for creating the new world. And the key with these is that they're small groups moving concentrically towards what I call the oceanic parliament. These small groups are highly dynamic, non-hierarchical, self-organizing, and following this universal framework of the water structure and water's nature. They're easily replicable, scalable, and incorporating the very best of permaculture and regenerative whole systems thinking, both engaging our ethos, implementation, and action. And the question is, why do we need this? And this is just a few examples. And this is a quote that Geoff supplied from a former punk star. Water companies, and this is for the UK only, this is only the UK, water companies have paid out, converted it into dollars, but 83 billion 535 624. I mean, that's just a mind-boggling number in 1 year in dividends paid out to shareholders. Well, so I'm guessing that's maybe not 1 year, but while in 2020 spending over 3.1 million hours on over 400,000 separate occasions dumping sewage into our rivers. To me, that what that indicates is there's a whole lot of profit going on and not a lot of action in terms of solving the problem. So this is happening all over the planet. Watersheds all over the planet are Asia, Africa. This looks like Nepal to me. The US, we are degrading our water at an alarming rate, and as well as the pollution of plastic, there's the deforestation, there's the stripping of ecosystems for their resources in many different ways. So Geoff, I'll let you come back to it. And here's the slide you spoke of. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. So this is a basic socio-tech model. This is not going to be a presentation, just to explain. On the left-hand side is the vision of what Elizabeth and we all would like to see happen. The top two boxes, the organization box and the systems, process and procedures box, they're known as the technical side of the organization, the hard side with a small h, the structure, the roles, responsibilities, process, procedures, and so on. The two big boxes at the bottom, the people and the culture, are what are known as the softer side. And far too often, not enough effort is put into addressing the items in those bottom boxes. Now you'll notice that, and I'll come on to each box in turn very, very briefly. If anyone has any follow-up questions, please contact us by email and I'll explain this in more detail. You'll notice that they're all interlinked, with the arrows running both ways in some occasions. And this is where we we'll bring systems thinking and systems, whole systems working, because every box has a knock-on effect with every other box, which is important. And to bring that to reality, yesterday we were on a session where one of the participants said there's a real need for us to work together, for us to understand each other's needs and primary drivers in order to help them help us all save the planet. And this lady used an example, I think it was in, was it in Ghana or in
Zimbabwe?
No, Zimbabwe, yes.
Project she was working on in Zimbabwe, yeah.
Yes, and what she was pointing out is, before asking them not to cut down trees and destroy their ecology, there needed to be a great effort on understanding why they were doing this and helping them understand why it wasn't helpful. And I mention this because, as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, one of the main outputs of our efforts will be having a toolbox and education, given we are talking about a global initiative which is to be carried out locally, learning from those local initiatives, and then transporting that into a global effort. That's where the box on the right-hand side, collaborative working and partnerships, comes in, and there is an awful lot under that box before we move on to achieving the objectives. So I carry Elizabeth.
Yeah, so you know, the place I see this starts is really people, right? This is, without people, you're not going to have a vision. You're not going to be influencing the environment. It's the choices that people make that is part of this discussion, right? That's the whole system, the whole planet of people's actions have brought the planet to a place of crises, and not just ecologically with regards to the environment, but socially as well. And so the skills, knowledge, and experience of people, to me, is a sort of primary. Is looking at that chart for me is one place to start. And you know, so much of the and I don't mean to move past these too much, but so much of our behaviors or our actions are based upon our behaviors. And I love how you've, as you say, have everything's going back and forth. It's a full interrelated system. So I'm going to have you speak to people a little bit.
That's good. Well, could you put the figure of 8 up? And I'll,
oh yeah, okay.
And while Elizabeth's doing that, I'll come on to this slide in one moment. Right. If you take the bottom half of that figure of 8, under organisation development, the bit on the red, in the red at the bottom, that's where that first socio-tech model lives. And in order to implement that organisation development model, we start with the purple box, which is in the real world. That's the organisation of World War II Council Concept, its formation and purpose. As we move out of that box, moving anti-clockwise, we have estimate requirements of the organisation, and then we move around that box, but at the same time we need to keep referring back to the top box, because in order to do that, as Elizabeth quite rightly points out, there's a lot of knowledge, skills and behaviours required in that. So each time we meet a requirement in the personal development in terms of knowledge, skills and behaviours, different people will need different learning events at different times in order to feed that back into the purple box, in order to progress the bottom half of the figure of 8. And to go back to my opening comments about knowledge, skills and behaviours, which I see in absolute abundance, I also see behaviours in terms of will in abundance. However, what we need to do is be conscious of and aware of, we have a global initiative here, which is a local one, local action, global initiative. And in order to transfer all that local learning including from the key indigenous tribes, in order to transfer that learning, we need to identify it, collect it, and then create a learning organization sitting over what we already are creating in order to learn from that. There is no one better, in my view, this is a personal view, than indigenous people who have maintained our planet for thousands of years. And all that learning either has been, or lots of it has been lost, and more of it is getting lost as time goes by. I don't need to remind, I probably don't need to, I'm sorry, carry on.
I can't really imagine that, but I'm curious as to how that, what you just said about the indigenous people, where this would land in these charts in terms of I mean, it almost defies charting, but.
So is that a question for me? Sorry.
Yeah, it's a question for you.
It lands in the previous slide, the socio-tech model, and it's collected because you'll see it is the feedback loops. There we are. So it's collected in terms of that bottom left-hand box under people. It's collected there and then fed forward into culture, and then fed forward into collaborating and working in partnerships. And then dropping out of the bottom of the collaborative working in partnerships into measures. How do we measure that? How do we monitor it? How then do we have ongoing constructive challenge to realign it, to feed it back into the box in the first place? What then was a global vision, or is a global vision, is done on a number of levels with local initiatives. So this needs to be a live diagram, and there's information passing around it all the time. And when I mentioned we need to create a learning organization, much as many organizations say, and a phrase I hate, we will learn from this.
Yeah.
People don't know how to learn. The only people that know how to learn are kids. we get bogged down as adults because we get into denial, and we think we're learning, we think we're passing the learning on, and we're not. That's why we need that feedback loop running through measures, monitor, realign, and back again. It needs to be done in a skilled and professional way, and there are plenty of ways of doing it. You've only got to Google learning organizations. There's a lot of misleading stuff in there, but there's also some good stuff. But we're going to build in the best practice of creating a learning organization that we possibly can. And I and colleagues of mine have a lot of experience at doing this. So does that answer your question, Elizabeth?
It does.
Okay.
I love the figure 8 slide. It's sort of taking the slide I showed at the beginning of the toroidal field and like opening it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a matter of doing it. You know, we need to make this whole initiative work, and we will make it work. The only question is as I mentioned again at the beginning, is speed, momentum, and competence. And competence is mentioned on that bottom right-hand corner in the little red box with the red typing.
Includes, I think I have that, there we go. Includes development of all competence. Knowledge, skills, both hard and soft, behaviors, and attitudes.
Yeah. Now, if you can imagine maybe an indigenous people or people in poorer countries that can't even read and write, bless them, the amount of knowledge they have is paramount. the behaviors is probably most of the time, well, it's always well intentioned, but they may not necessarily know what harm they're doing to the planet. So all that needs bolstering with having the required skills. By the same token, we know there are plenty of people, and probably in the Western world, worst of all, I say that coming from the Western world, who have the skills, but they don't have the knowledge and they don't have the behaviors. And worse than that, they don't even know that they don't have the knowledge.
Right.
And they don't
That
have
they
the
think that they do.
Absolutely.
Right.
So it's two very complex diagrams working together. That's why I say it's a mammoth task. But in fact, it is all doable. Again, depends on the speed, the momentum we can drive it with, which is essential, and the competences, and we put them into place as soon as we identify a need, and there's already a massive need.
Well, it's interesting what you speak to with the indigenous people, because here in my region, it's a fire hazard, and right now it's extreme. And part of the problem is that for 200 years, they've been suppressing fires. And the indigenous people actually used fire, and they used it very intentionally, very specifically, and as a technology, as a very well understood land management, in terms of the time of year they would burn and where they would burn. And what they were doing was allowing the undergrowth to be taken down, and so that the deer and the game was plentiful. So they were practicing indigenous technologies of game management and land management, and I can't think that they had the forest fires. And when the Europeans first came to my area, which is the Great Central Valley of California, it was one of the most abundant ecosystems. They're just the stories of the level of game, the herds and within 50 years it was all gone. There's a lot that we can learn from indigenous teaching. Certainly how to live in balance and harmony with the natural world as a part of the natural world. I have a couple questions for you here that I'd love for you to consider. One is, what are your thoughts on education and awareness as being one of the biggest challenges in helping the Watershed Wisdom Councils become a reality?
Yeah, sure. Big question.
Yeah.
This is
because it is ultimately an educational organization.
Absolutely. There are two words spring to mind initially. Is one of humility, and one of trust.
Both very good words.
Yes, actually, and they need to be practiced.
Yeah.
Inherent and part of one's value system to make them meaningful. I mean, I cannot picture me successfully sitting down with an elder from an indigenous tribe and making any sense to them with this approach. What I can envisage is me sitting down with someone who's an intermediary that understands the points I'm trying to get over educationally and understands the indigenous mindset that has done this for thousands of years and protected our planet. I can envisage that. So that's where collaboration comes in that socio-tech slide.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to understand and accept that we don't know what we don't know. And we don't know everything.
Yeah.
But there is someone out there that does know, that can help us. And that's why I also mentioned on that socio-tech slide, a partnership. Now, what I can envisage is me sitting with a CEO in some public body who's presenting deliberately or subconsciously incorrect information,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm used to that. And I can imagine myself and said CEO and an indigenous person or someone from a deprived country sitting down with someone who can bridge the gap in communication, because we're talking here about communication, and getting those very points over so that we actually understand each other's needs and primary drivers before we get on to creating any sort of change.
Right.
So education and awareness and exchanging that and being a learning organization and deploying whole systems thinking and whole systems cross-cultural working. And it's going to be hard work and time consuming. So we need momentum behind it. We need people behind it.
Yeah.
Is that going away to answering the question?
It does. What's coming to mind is coming back to those words of humility and trust. Is, certainly the Western world, and for me, I tend not to see it as Western or first world, third world, developed, undeveloped. For me, the indigenous, I have a high degree of respect for the indigenous people, and not every person of a native culture is indigenous. There's a distinction there. Is that, to me, being indigenous is remembering our primary core sacred relationship with water and the earth that's born and nurtured of water. And so to find an indigenous elder or even an indigenous young person that's living this, it's not so easy, because the indigenous cultures have been subjugated and intentionally canceled and marginalized. And so I think we have an opportunity to, the Amazon rainforest is a classic example. The indigenous elders, with all of their wisdom, are dying at an alarming rate. And recognizing that, we have a window of opportunity before the next generation will come up and be completely uneducated and brainwashed as to the false narrative of our relationship to the planet. And so I think it's very important to, with the Watershed Wisdom Councils, to humbly begin building trust with the indigenous wisdom keepers. And and part of that is the humility, is to know what it is that we don't know.
Yeah, great. I love that phrase, wisdom keepers.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what culture you come from, right? And I'm going to actually need to take a pause here. So I'm going to put myself just briefly on mute, and I'm not sure what to do. I live here with my mother, and she's just let me know that she needs something.
That's okay. So should we take a break for 5 minutes?
We can take a break for 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. See you in 5.
I'll stop the share here.
Thank you.
Back. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Yeah, she
Can you hear me okay?
fell and broke her hip, unfortunately. So
What, just?
not just
Oh,
now.
right, so she's okay.
No, she's okay. She just needed a little bit of care.
Okay, good. Okay.
Thank you for your patience. We
No
should have
problem.
paused the recording, but
That's okay.
a little interlude.
I'm sure with your expertise,
Yeah.
you can doctor all that.
So
Okay.
yeah, so let's kind of come back to where we were there. So aligned with that first question is, how do you see us establishing people's primary needs whilst encouraging them to make necessary changes and putting forward, as the woman you mentioned, Nadia, talked about yesterday?
Yeah.
What are the steps for that? I mean, because that's really what we're trying to do is balance, our need to be alive and to care for ourselves and to get what we need for survival and thrivability, not just survival, against what the holding capacity of what the earth can take in terms of extraction.
The answer is through people, and hopefully there are enough people going to be watching this video eventually, and we will push out more videos if necessary to get the message out, because we ourselves are into a massive phase of education and awareness in helping you achieve the astounding vision for water.
Liz, is the other one for you?
Okay.
Hang on just a second. What?
Is this other one for you?
No, for Una.
Oh,
Through people comes down to the concentric circles that we mentioned. So we are part of a core circle at the moment.
Can I go back to the slides?
Yeah. I feel I need to talk about the simplified version. So if people can imagine, not quite that one, but the other, yeah, that's it. That will do nicely. So we're sat there in the very center, you, I, and Nancy. And then there's a circle in there in the very center. And then there's another circle. And in that gap between the two circles, there will be mini circles, as we have shown with black boundaries.
Yeah.
And in each of those will be a number of people, Nadia being one, and a number of colleagues. These could be geographical, will be geographical, but will also be functional as well. So what we're talking, this is where the local to global comes into it. And we will learn within those circles. And what's more, as important, if you remember on the socio-tech slide, the arrows going either way, backwards and forwards between the different boxes. There'll be arrows going backwards and forwards between each of those small circles on that diagram you're showing now, where we're transferring learning. And then we draw another concentric circle, each with different groups of people on. So we need an information flows, that's fine. We need information flows between each of them. So people will learn from this. They will learn who needs to develop what knowledge, skills, or behaviors. This sounds terribly complicated. It isn't. It's just it's just a little bit complex,
Right.
but it's doable. And eventually, when we get a critical mass flowing and the system flowing, and these circles all spinning together, then we're starting to get there. The system will feed itself, and the phrase that you used earlier, which I can't find, which I can't spot, as I'll come to in a moment. It's something about building resilient communities.
Yeah, that's
So each of these becomes a community of interest around a specific topic or location or effort.
and affinity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes, yeah. So we will build momentum, retain it, sustain it, and more importantly, build and sustain a culture of water of life's source, and understanding what we're doing rather than what's happening at the moment is happening. Things are happening by default or ignorance or
Right.
both.
Right.
So we'll be. I hate the word, but it's important. We will be in control of the situation rather than the situation being in control of us, because we'll be avoiding politics with a capital P.
Mm-hmm.
So the people will achieve this, the people whose very lives depend on it, i.e. you and I and all the other 7 billion people.
So how do you see the complexity versus like this most simple, effective method? Like in there, I see the sociotech and figure of 8 diagrams that you just gave being deployed in practice, in the sort of tangible on the ground implementation of, growing through the core circle of, and I say that right now it's you, me, and Nancy, but it's also people we haven't met yet, or just
Yes.
beginning to meet right here, right? And people I've met in my life, and pulling together that core circle that can help guide this into actuality. How do we grow out from what's the next process to grow from that core into watersheds around the planet? I mean, I have my ideas, but I would love to hear yours.
Right, mine's a simple start point. If we were to get 20 people together on this call, even better 50,
Mm-hmm.
and even better 500,
Mm-hmm.
we could then discover their standpoints. And by standpoints, I mean, so as a result of this session we've just had, any future session, my question would be, so what part are you prepared to and happy to play in this?
Mm-hmm.
And that's about commitment, not involvement. So what will you commit to in just one simple sentence? And it might be leading one of these concentric circles that are looking at either a particular subject, a particular geography, a particular function,
Mm-hmm.
or in the case of Wisdom Water Council Concept, to prove the concept, there could be water stewards, water ambassadors, watershed keepers,
Mm-hmm.
and getting a group of people together in that concentric circle. And the idea would be there's a watershed, there's a keeper for every watershed globally. Now
Right.
that sounds enormous, but we do have 7 billion people performing this. So once
Well,
this
that's the key is keeping the units concise and small groups, because we don't function very well as the groups start getting, more than 20 or even more than like 12, right? In terms
Yep.
of really being effective, the small groups.
Mhm.
And the way I see it is that the small groups have a representative that goes to the next concentric on this slide. So, this is sort of broad at the headwaters. And the whole thing about the Watershed Wisdom Council concept is basically ridge to reef, that, at the widest point of a watershed, as it spreads out at the headwaters, there's a 1,000 different creeks and rivulets. Each one of them can have a group representing it. And these are circles of trust.
Yep.
That it's people you trust, it's not a situation of kind of battling opponents in this group or that group. It's very much building on the circles of trust. And each of these smaller circles is what I call the plenipotentiary, that starts feeding into this central. And it may seem small, but as this is a toroidal field, it's actually very vast, which ultimately is our goal of pure water for the planet and the oceanic parliament.
Yep. Let me just tell you a story I was told 40 years ago, with essentially 2 stonemasons, 2 bricklayers.
Okay, before you jump into that story, I just want us to mark the time
Okay.
that we do have our next session starting in about 10 minutes. So
It'll take me 30 seconds, this one, and then I'll
beautiful.
continue with the circle.
Okay, thank you.
And the bishop was walking around the site one day. One of the guys, he asked him what he was doing, and he said, I'm just shaping this piece of stone to put up there. And they asked the other guy, who was doing exactly the same thing with a different piece of stone, and asked him what he was doing, and he said, I'm building you a cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to get the mindset of, with all these groups of people, all these teams of people, that we're actually building a cathedral together. Might not look like one at the moment, but eventually it'll start to emerge, which in itself will give us momentum. And I've mentioned momentum a number of times, in which we start to build that momentum. What we need to determine is what will be required within the circles, intercircle and intracircle, in terms of communication, support, relationships, learning, passing on that learning. In summary, how will we build a critical mass of watershed wisdom councils, and how will we help them to collaborate and remain aligned? And the key to all that is we all have the same purpose.
Mm-hmm.
We're all building a cathedral, and that's how
Right.
we align.
Right. A cathedral for the whole planet.
Absolutely. Well, it's called the Oceanic Parliament, actually.
That's
it's our
right.
cathedral. But that's just
Yeah.
an analogy, and we need to move away from the idea of groups of people towards teams of people, because the only real difference between a group and a team is they all have a shared purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
in order to keep it effective and efficient, we need to ensure that everyone knows what the purpose is and knows what the cathedral looks like, i.e. the Oceanic Parliament.
Mm-hmm. And those people with shared purpose come in every sector of society.
Absolutely.
And
And-
so being
and,
sort of agnostic, even though we're building a cathedral,
Yes.
still being agnostic in terms
Okay.
of who we are open to receiving, right? It's very much open walls.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do want to mention quickly that I've been getting involved with the seeds regenerative economic ecosystem, and it's a cryptocurrency that's the only cryptocurrency that's based on abundance and not scarcity. Every other monetary currency is based on holding that back and controlling that and creating value through scarcity, as opposed to building a regenerative, resilient culture based on abundance. And for me, part of what I've been doing with this concept is trying to plant it in groups of people, and find allies. And so for me, that's been one of my first steps, is finding alliances between groups and beginning to talk about this concept as being a model that can be followed. And it's just a model. It's a favorite saying of mine is that the map is not the terrain.
Mm-hmm.
That we can build a map and give it to people, but it's not until we actually get into it that and that's what I love about your charts, is that there's always that feedback loop of gathering data. How are we doing? Where do we need to adjust? Continuing the learning. And this is an evolutionary experiment. None of us have been here before.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and in the call last night with the group of seeds pioneers, the bottom line was, why not try this experiment?
Yep.
Because it just could work.
Well, it will work.
It will work. It will work.
It's just a matter of how fast.
Yeah, that's right.
And where I am in practice is I'm on the top part of the figure of 8, using the figure of 8 as a recruiting tool.
That's right.
And I'm doing that through education and awareness, called producing a video with Elizabeth Herald.
That's right.
So I know exactly where I am on all that information.
Yeah.
And
the more people can see themselves and find themselves within that information, the better we're going to be applying the genius, the skills, the knowledge, the techniques, the tools.
And everything out there amongst 7 billion people.
Right.
They all have something to offer.
That's right.
No matter how deprived. Elizabeth, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise, Geoff.
And let me just reinforce the message that it's only action that will get us there, and we need people to take that action.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
We're taking it, but it's doomed if we don't have lots of support, lots of effort going forward, and we're prepared to support you. And bear in mind, we are all the change. We are each of us the change we want to create.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the opportunity for each and every person who listens to this video to become a world leader.
And a true change agent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, your wisdom.
No problem. Thank you for your time also and the opportunity.
Okay, very good.
Bye.
Bye. See you soon.
Yeah, absolutely.